Putin entered 2026 with a plan that, on paper, carried a certain operational logic. Finish Donbas, break the fortress belt, encircle Kramatorsk, end the war on terms Moscow could frame as victory. Pokrovsk had fallen. The front, according to Kremlin-aligned analysts, would collapse under the weight of that loss. 6 months passed. The front did not collapse. And while Russia's offensive machinery ground itself down against prepared Ukrainian defenses, something shifted in the operational picture that most headline coverage has not adequately captured. On the 15th of May, 2026, Ukraine advanced on 3 separate fronts in a single day. Not probing actions, not limited local adjustments. Coordinated offensive pressure across the Kharkiv, Kostiantynivka, and Siversk directions simultaneously. What that single day revealed about the current state of the Russian military is, in my assessment, more significant than any territorial measurement can convey. What follows is not a summary of daily battlefield updates. It is an attempt to read the pattern beneath those updates, to identify what the May 15th advances, the Pokrovsk trap, the fortress belt stalemate, and the casualty mathematics collectively reveal about where this war actually stands in mid-2026. The picture that emerges is considerably more consequential than the frontline maps suggest. The May 15th operation in the Kharkiv direction is the right place to begin, because it illustrates the tactical evolution that is driving the broader shift. The 129th Heavy Mechanized Brigade, operating with the Shkval Assault Battalion and the Rugby Team UAV Battalion, liberated the village of Odradne and its surrounding area, 22 square kilometers recovered in a single operation. Russia had captured Odradne on the 22nd of November 2025 and spent the following 6 months fortifying it. Trenches excavated, firing positions established in wooded terrain, mines laid across approach routes. By any conventional military assessment, this was a hardened position that should have required significant time and casualties to dislodge. The operation took hours. The tactical formula applied deserves careful attention because it is replicable and because Russia currently has no answer for it. Rugby Team's drone assets identified and engaged Russian defensive positions before any Ukrainian infantry moved. Artillery suppressed what the drones had located. Shkval infantry then advanced to secure cleared positions. The sequence matters. Drones clear the operational picture and degrade the defense before soldiers enter the kill zone, rather than using soldiers to locate the defense through contact. The 16th Army Corps confirmed 22 square kilometers liberated. Russian losses in the engagement were confirmed at 56 soldiers. Deep State's assessment of what happened to those who survived is worth quoting precisely. Those who could escape fled. That phrasing did not come from Ukrainian military communications. It came from independent battlefield monitoring. Soldiers abandoning fortified positions they had held and reinforced for 6 months points to something that goes beyond physical attrition. It points to psychological collapse in units whose capacity for organized resistance has deteriorated to the point where the instinct under pressure is flight rather than defense. The same day in the south, Ukrainian counterattacks at the Kostiantynivka front halted Russian advances that had been slowly accumulating since October 2025. ISW's May 15th assessment confirmed Ukrainian advances in the Kharkiv and Kostiantynivka directions simultaneously, with additional confirmed progress. In the Siversk direction near Vovchansk, where the 23rd Assault Regiment captured 3 Russian soldiers. 3 fronts, 3 different Ukrainian units, all advancing on the same day. Russia defending on all 3. The Shkval-Rugby Team formula from Odradne is not a one-off innovation. It is a doctrine that Ukrainian brigades are applying at scale, and the Russian army's consistent inability to respond to it reflects how thoroughly tactical flexibility has been degraded at the unit level. To understand why the May 15th advances carry the significance they do, the context of Russia's 2026 operational plan needs to be examined honestly. The fortress belt, a roughly 50-kilometer chain of fortified cities running north to south through Donbas, Kostiantynivka, Druzhkivka, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, has been the backbone of Ukrainian defensive depth in the region since 2014. Russia's entire 2026 campaign was built around breaking this belt. The operational logic was coherent. Pokrovsk had fallen, supply routes to the belt were under pressure, and with sufficient force concentration, the belt cities could be isolated and reduced sequentially. None of it materialized. At Kostiantynivka, Russian forces infiltrated the eastern outskirts in October 2025. By ISW's May 4th special assessment, 6 months of sustained offensive effort had produced not even tactically significant gains. That assessment used language that, for an organization that measures its phrasing carefully, was notably direct. Kremlin officials had issued exaggerated victory claims around Kostiantynivka repeatedly throughout this period. By May 13th, a Kremlin-linked Russian military blogger openly acknowledged that Ukrainian forces were effectively targeting concentrated Russian troops and that the assault had stalled. When a military blogger operating within the constraints of Russian information space feels compelled to contradict official claims, the gap between narrative and reality has become too wide to manage even internally. The operational data behind that admission is worth examining precisely. According to Makovets's assessment, Russian forces had been advancing at a maximum of 1 kilometer per week for over a month at Kostiantynivka. Each kilometer, at current engagement intensity, costs approximately 200 Russian soldiers. Ukrainian counterattacks were reclaiming some of those positions within days of their capture. The two main supply roads into Kostiantynivka are under continuous Russian drone and artillery interdiction, meaning Ukraine is accepting significant logistical risk to hold the city, which reflects how clearly Ukrainian planners understand what losing it would mean. If Kostiantynivka falls, the road to Kramatorsk opens. Ukraine is defending it accordingly. The situation at Chasiv Yar, which has been contested for more than 20 months, tells a parallel story. Russia has been attempting to take this city since 2024. The terrain matters. Chasiv Yar sits on elevated ground, and its capture would allow Russian artillery to shell Kostiantynivka from above, fundamentally changing the geometry of the fortress belt defense. In April 2026, Russia launched 2 separate mechanized assaults on the city. ISW assessed that neither achieved tactical gains. The failure of both mechanized operations in sequence is not simply a tactical setback. It is a diagnostic indicator of how badly Russian infantry and armor coordination has deteriorated. With Starlink access removed from unauthorized Russian military terminals in February 2026, field communications have fractured. Units operating without reliable communications cannot coordinate combined arms maneuver. 20 months of continuous effort, every shell fired, every soldier committed, every armored vehicle deployed, and the city has not fallen. ISW's April 2026 special report concluded that Russia does not possess the capacity to militarily seize the fortress belt in 2026, and assessed that even in the most optimistic scenario for Moscow, it would not occur before late 2027 or early 2028, and only if Western support to Ukraine were cut off entirely. The psychological impact of that operational reality on Russian commanders and soldiers is a factor that receives less analytical attention than the territorial measurements, but it may be more consequential in the medium term. Commanders who understand the objective is unreachable, but continue receiving orders to attack it, are not operating in a condition conducive to initiative, adaptation, or the kind of tactical creativity that military effectiveness requires. Soldiers who watch the same ground change hands repeatedly, who hear that the unit before them failed in the same position, who arrive at the front with 1 week of training rather than the months that competent military preparation requires, are soldiers whose defensive reflexes, let alone offensive capacity, have been structurally compromised. The connection between the Fortress Belt stalemate and the Pokrovsk campaign is where the deeper operational logic of Russia's current predicament becomes visible. Pokrovsk fell in January-February 2026, and it was genuinely Russia's most significant territorial gain since Bakhmut. Pokrovsk was the logistics hub of the Donetsk direction, the intersection of supply corridors, the city whose fall every analyst had flagged as a potential inflection point. When it fell, the BBC wrote that the road to Kramatorsk had opened and that Donetsk was effectively lost. Neither assessment proved accurate for a reason that reflects careful Ukrainian operational planning. Ukraine had been constructing defense lines further west of Pokrovsk throughout the period when Russian pressure on the city was escalating. By the time Russian forces entered Pokrovsk, the defensive depth they expected to exploit had already been reconstituted behind them. The second reason Pokrovsk did not produce the anticipated collapse is the one that, in my reading, tells us the most about where the war is heading. Russia suffered casualties taking Pokrovsk at a scale that left the attacking formations without the combat power to exploit the capture. Tens of thousands of soldiers lost in the final phases of the battle meant that the units which entered Pokrovsk had been so attrited that westward advance was beyond their remaining capacity. ISW's February 2026 assessment confirmed no operationally significant advances after Pokrovsk's seizure and no significant progress west of the city since December 2025. CSIS compared the rate of Russian advance to the Battle of the Somme in 1916 and found Russia slower. An average daily advance of 50 meters in 2024, 30 to 40 meters per day toward Pokrovsk in 2025, 108 years after the Somme with satellite-guided munitions and drone swarms, slower than the Great War. At the rate of 1 kilometer costing approximately 200 soldiers, the mathematics of Russian territorial ambition become rapidly unsustainable. The resource allocation consequences of these simultaneous failures have produced a compounding effect across the entire front. Russia operates from a single manpower and equipment pool, and every commitment to one sector creates a gap in another. The plan to encircle Kramatorsk required pressure from the north through Lyman toward Sloviansk and from the south through Kostiantynivka. The 20th Combined Arms Army and the 1st Tank Army committed to the northern axis had been ground down by Ukrainian counterattacks around Kupiansk. The southern axis had stalled at Kostiantynivka. Both arms of the intended encirclement were broken before the operation could develop. The 90th Tank Division was shifted to the Pokrovsk direction, weakening the front it had been holding. VDV airborne units were redeployed to Zaporizhia, reducing offensive capacity in Donetsk. The Fifth Army lost more than 20,000 troops in the Humilia area, requiring the stripping of soldiers from the 29th and 36th Armies as replacements. Each decision that addresses one gap creates another, and the gap creation process is accelerating faster than the gap-filling capacity can keep pace. The casualty mathematics underlying all of this deserve to be stated without euphemism. Russia is losing approximately 35,000 soldiers per month. Monthly mobilization stands at roughly 27,000. The equation is negative, and it has been negative consistently for several months. A leaked Kremlin report assessed total Russian casualties since February 2022 at 1,315,000. Zelensky has publicly stated that even this figure has been reduced from the actual count. To fully take Donbas at current casualty rates, Zelensky's assessment is that Russia would need to sacrifice between 300,000 and 1 million additional soldiers, representing 1 to 3 more years of war at present intensity. Every month, the equation worsens slightly. Every month, the gap between losses and replacements widens marginally. Marginal deterioration compounding over months and years describes a trajectory, and the trajectory is not toward Russian strategic success. The solution Russia has applied to close the mobilization gap has deepened the underlying problem rather than resolving it. Reducing training time from 1 month to 1 week produces soldiers who reach the front without basic tactical competence. Unfamiliar with maneuver principles, unable to communicate effectively with adjacent units, lacking the foundational confidence in their own skills that allows soldiers to function under fire. At Odradne, those who could escape fled. This is the predictable output of a system that is consuming human material faster than it can prepare replacements and has responded by reducing the preparation standard rather than the consumption rate. The political signals accompanying the military deterioration are worth noting because they suggest the pressure is beginning to propagate upward through the system. On May 13th, The governors of Belgorod and Bryansk Oblasts were dismissed simultaneously, an unusual move whose timing, coinciding with the period of documented frontline failure and Ukrainian deep strikes into Russian territory, suggests the political cost of military inadequacy is being distributed more broadly than before. On May 9th, Victory Day, Putin did not invite a single member of his own party's parliamentary delegation to Red Square. The parade featured no tanks, no missiles. UK Defense Intelligence's May 12th assessment noted that the scaling down of the parade reflects the Kremlin's awareness of its own vulnerability. Victory Day has been Putin's most reliable annual demonstration of strength and domestic consensus. A Victory Day without hardware, without parliamentary participation, without the traditional displays of military power is not a celebration. It is a performance of absence. The technological dimension connecting these failures requires explicit treatment because it is the common thread running through the tactical, operational, and strategic levels simultaneously. In February 2026, SpaceX remotely disabled Starlink terminals that Russian military units had been operating without authorization. Ukraine had established a whitelist system under which only registered terminals remain functional. The effect on Russian operations was immediate and has proven persistent. Drone coordination degraded, field communications fractured, real-time reconnaissance capability lost. Months later, Russia has not identified a functional alternative. Ukrainian cyber units have established fake terminal activation services designed to collect location data from Russian soldiers attempting to reconnect their units to satellite communication. Soldiers seeking to restore communications are instead transmitting their positions to Ukrainian intelligence. The Adapt Institute's analysis identified Russia's Starlink loss as one of the primary enabling factors behind the success of Ukraine's Zaporizhia counteroffensive. A single commercial satellite access decision altered the operational balance across multiple fronts. The failure of both mechanized assaults at Chasiv Yar has the same technical explanation. Combined arms coordination without reliable communications is an attack conducted in operational blindness. Infantry and armor that cannot communicate cannot support each other. An assault that cannot coordinate is an assault that fails against prepared defenses, regardless of the numerical strength committed to it. Russia retains significant presence on the front line, and precision analysis requires acknowledging this clearly. More than 700,000 soldiers remain deployed. Numerical superiority still favors Russia across most sectors. Glide bomb capacity, particularly the KAB-3000, is substantial and cannot be effectively intercepted without the air defense systems Ukraine does not currently possess in sufficient density. These bombs are demolishing the infrastructure of fortress belt cities, reducing them street by street to rubble that is easier to defend than to attack. The Rubicon Advanced Drone Technology Center has been deployed to the Pokrovsk direction. Drone control infrastructure is being established at elevated positions targeting Ukrainian logistics. Russia can still strike with considerable effect. The critical distinction, and it is the central finding of every serious assessment of the current operational situation, is the chasm between the capacity to strike and the capacity to advance. Numerical superiority without coordination produces casualties, not territory. Bombing without the infantry quality to exploit the damage produces ruins, not captured cities. The paradox of a force that is powerful but ineffective has a historical precedent that the situation in Donbas increasingly resembles. At Verdun in 1916, German Chief of Staff Falkenhayn designed an operation intended to bleed France dry through sustained attrition. 10 months and 700,000 casualties later, the army that had bled most was Germany's. Putin's design for Ukraine has followed the same trajectory. An attrition strategy that was intended to exhaust the opponent has exhausted the strategist instead. A further mobilization wave is theoretically available to Moscow. The numbers exist in Russia's demographic reservoir, but the political cost of extraction is no longer abstract. Warnings invoking 1917, the year Tsarist Russia's internal order collapsed under the weight of military failure and domestic exhaustion, are circulating within Russian elite discourse. Oligarchs are resisting nationalization pressures. Women in Samara have been documented publicly demanding Putin's resignation. A deputy minister evaded FSB surveillance and defected to the United States, mobilizing more soldiers into a system that is already consuming them faster than it can replace them, in a war whose costs are becoming visible to the population funding it, carries domestic political risks that compound with each additional conscription cycle. Ukraine, during all of this, is not standing still. Operations like Odradne are eroding Russian positional gains methodically. The deep strike campaign against Russian petroleum infrastructure has taken approximately 20% of total refinery capacity offline on a sustained basis. Pressure sufficient to force defensive preparation even on Crimea's beaches has been maintained. The 15th of May, 2026. 3 fronts. 1 day. Ukraine advancing. 6 days earlier, May 9th. Red Square, no tanks, no missiles. The distance between those two scenes is the operational summary of Russia's 2026 offensive. 4 years, 1.3 million casualties by the Kremlin's own suppressed accounting, an advance slower than the Somme. 35,000 soldiers lost each month against 27,000 mobilized. The mathematics do not require interpretation. They simply require the willingness to read them without the filters that either side's preferred narrative imposes. In 1916, Falkenhayn said Germany would bleed France dry. Germany bled more. Putin said Russia would exhaust Ukraine's will. Russia's will to sustain the cost of the war is now the variable under more structural pressure than Ukraine's. Russia has not lost its offensive power. What it has lost is the capacity to convert that power into results that change the strategic situation. And Ukraine is no longer simply the side that endures. It is the side that strikes back on 3 fronts simultaneously, raises its flag over villages held for 6 months, and watches the soldiers sent to defend them run. If this analysis gave you a clearer picture of where the operational balance actually stands in mid-2026, share it with someone still reading only the territorial maps. And if you want breakdowns that go into the strategic mechanics rather than the daily position updates, follow along. There is considerably more to unpack.